Hey everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of the Hanson Audio Molten Kit tutorial. Now, it's very hot in the UK today, as you can tell, because I might look quite shiny, so I do apologise for that. But today we're going to be talking about routing. Now, routing is super important in Kontakt because it allows you the full flexibility to get control out of all of the different drums inside of Kontakt. If I wanted to, say, EQ just a kick and a snare, we could do that with just the built-in Hanson Audio EQs, but if I wanted to run it through some special outboard gear, or I wanted to do something with it in the mix, I wouldn't be able to do that unless I routed out. So what this is going to allow us to do is to have the kick, snare, toms, all on separate channels inside of Kontakt. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but this tutorial shouldn't take too long. And while I am using Cubase, this same method can be applied following slightly different steps and menus, but different tutorials for those exist online by just searching on YouTube how to multi-out Kontakt Reaper Logic. So the first step to do is, this is obviously our song that we worked on in the last video. Now what we need to do is come straight down here, outputs. You can see right now they're just outputting to one audio file. This will be all the drums. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I think maybe 10 should suffice. And we're just going to create them like this. Inside of Kontakt, Kontakt still is only set all of these channels to 1 and 2. We don't have any of these assigned, and at many stages in this tutorial we may have to restart Kontakt in order for it to take effect, but that's okay because we can save this as a snapshot and just reload it. Now what we need to do here is let's start renaming these. ST1 just stands for stereo, so let's say kick, snare, and all we're doing here is naming our virtual channels inside of Kontakt. This is before it hits your DAW. This is just Kontakt's own internal mixer. Tom. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to put all the toms into one audio file, but you can do rack tom, floor toms, or tom 1, tom 2, tom 3, tom 4. But for the sake of this video, I'm keeping it short and sweet. I'm going to keep it just the toms. Kick, snare, toms, overheads. I guess kind of like ride, maybe. Maybe China's we might want to mix separately, and let's say room. We may have to restart Kontakt in order for this to take effect, but I am just going to remove the excess channels that we have here, and it does actually give you a warning that you may need to restart Kontakt for changes to apply. Now, kick, snare, toms, overhead, rise, China, room. First thing I'm going to do is we need to assign an output. So this is actually where Kontakt is sending its outputs to your DAW. So right now they're all sending on 1 and 2, so we just need to go 3 and 4. 5 and 6. Don't really worry about what's written here. It can sometimes look a little bit like gibberish, but it's just some kind of communication between your DAW and Kontakt, and it kind of has its own kind of naming system, but try not to pay much attention to it. There is a way to change it, but just for the time being, just look at the numbers. So each one is ascending. 11 and 12 and 13 and 14. So if you think this is 14 mono channels or 7 stereo channels that's coming out, all we need to do is tell our DAW now is that we are creating 7 stereo channels that we want to come from Kontakt. So to do this in Cubase, you go VST Instruments, Kontakt, activate outputs, and you see here, and it has actually done it without having to restart, which is amazing. We've got kick, snare, toms, overheads, ride, China's, room. Perfect, look at that. So now, if I bring my mixer window over, you can see here that I've got drums, snare, toms, overheads, ride, China's, room. Now, drums really is stereo 1 and 2. Now, this is like the host output. We can rename this to kick, which is fine, but just remember that your kick actually is the window that brings up all of the drums. But that's just because it's on 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is the main window. You start routing these out. So you can see that if I click the kick drum, on 1 and 2, it still comes out. Same as all the toms, they're still only coming out of 1. So we now need to tell the Molten Kit individually that we want to send it to each one of these different channels. Now this can be done by going to the mixer window, and down here you'll see ST1, ST1. Now this is where we will unfortunately need to reload our instruments, as when it loads in, it does only bring it in with 1 channel, because we create these channels after we loaded the instrument in. But that's not a problem, so we can actually just save this as a snapshot, which will save all of our different drums and all of our different mixing, and then we will also do the same for the cymbals. Save this as a snapshot, HA video. Okay, so just a side note here, what you'll want to do is, I learned this the hard way, is you will definitely want to save your mapping. So the mapping isn't saved in the snapshot, so what you want to do is save your mapping by hitting export mapping, desktop, or wherever you want. This will be Bogren Digital map, and then you want to do the same for Hanson Audio. settings, mapping presets, Hanson audio, export mapping, Hanson audio, map. That's if you have any custom mappings. So for example, for this video I made one, and that's just going to save where all of your different key strokes are for each different MIDI thing, and then we can go ahead and save it as a snapshot, and then we'll re-import it. Now all we got to do is reload. With the kits reloaded, all I do is bring up our snapshots again. So I go user and then our preset, which will just bring up exactly how we had it before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reload our mappings that we have from earlier. So mapping preset, and I'll hit import mapping, I'll go to desktop, and then I'll load the HA map, and I'll do the same for Bogdan Digital because this is going to keep our keys the same. I'll go to settings and mapping because you can see all of these are different. Clear, import map, desktop, which is where I saved it, BD map, perfect. It's also very important to set this to Omni if you're using both in one contact session, as this will mean that it triggers from the one MIDI file. Perfect. Now this is going to be exactly how we were before, and with any luck, we should be able to go back to mixer, and perfect. So our kick on the kick. Now you can do this in two different ways. You can have all of the sub and the overhead and the close room and the medium room and the far room going to just the kick. And that way you kind of got more sample base, like if you were using slate trigger. But I like to bust them out or route them out as if I was doing a real drum kit recording. So sub I also send to kick, overhead I send to overheads, close room I will send to room, medium room I send to room, far room I will send to room. Now if you created another 3 channels, you could send each one of these rooms to a different room. But for the sake of this video, again, I'm keeping it simple, we've got one room channel. And then when you have one room channel, it's very important to adjust your balance and everything to your liking. So we'll go to snare. Again, so the snare will now go to the snare, the bottom will now go to the snare, the overhead will go to the overhead, close room to the room, medium room to the room, far room to the room, sustain we'll put back in snare, tom 1, we'll send to tom, bottom, tom, overhead, overheads, close room, rooms, medium room, room, far room, room. You only have to do this once, then you can save it as a template in your DAW, so you never have to set it up again. Tom 2, toms, bottom, toms, overhead, overheads, close room, room, medium room, room, far room, room, tom 3, toms, bottom, toms, overhead, overheads, close room, room, medium room, room, far room, room, toms, bottom, toms, overhead, overhead, close room, rooms, medium room, room, far room, room, final tom, 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 overhead, overhead, room, 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 room. Now, with any luck, you should see that our kick coming through on our main kick, and the overhead mic for the kick, and the room mic for the kick going through on their own separate channel. Same with the snare, same with all the toms. Look at that, beautiful. Perfect. So that's the Molten Kit routed out perfectly. Now, let's route our cymbals. So we'll do a very similar sort of thing. So we're not using any of the shells here, but what we can do is hats to overheads, hats to overheads, ride to ride, overheads to overheads, and room to room. Now, when I play this, perfect, look, they're coming through on their own separate channels, which is exactly what we wanted. So, we're ready to go. So, as you can see, we have our kit routed out now. We've got our kick, snare, toms, overhead, ride, chimes, and room. And if we wanted to do any mixing, we could just do it from here. This is going to allow us fantastic control over these individual channels. So thanks for watching, and join us in the next part where we start mixing.